Hello, I'm Jim Cornell, and this is Base to Base, the weekly biotech podcast from Air Coastal Media. Yes, welcome again to the Base to Base Biotech podcast, and this episode is going out on June the 6th, one of only 12 times a year when the way the US and the rest of the world writes the date and month can agree. I didn't do quite as many interviews as usual this week, so that was an opportunity to catch up on editing. I know it's possible to get programs that do that for you, but one, they cost money, and two, I still think the results aren't as good as if you do it yourself. Or maybe I'm just old and bitter, among other things. Before we get going, if you do have suggestions for who should be on the podcast, or indeed any other suggestions or comments, please do get in touch at jim@deeptechdigest.com. Last week, our guests were Ben Zeskind, CEO of Immuneering, who is hoping to not necessarily cure cancer, but to turn it into a chronic disease that is manageable. Our other guest was Erwin Berthier, CTO and co-founder of US company Tasso, which has developed devices that modernize blood collection, making it something that can be done from the comfort of your own home, with less pain and less fear, hopefully too. This week we have a conversation with Ben Cliff, CEO of Concept Life Sciences, a provider of drug discovery, development and manufacturing services to the global pharma and biotech sector. And that's a company that just announced an investment into its drug discovery capabilities. But first, Sitryx. It is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company developing novel oral therapies to restore immune balance in autoimmune and inflammatory disease. To tell us about its work is the company's Chief Medical Officer, Ravi Rao. Start things then, and if you could tell me a little bit about the history of the company.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jim, for asking me to come and talk to you today. We are Sitryx Therapeutics. We're a biotech company that's been focused on modulating immune cell metabolism. And we've really been a pioneer in this field since the company was founded in 2018. And the focus really is researching and then developing drugs focused on how metabolic changes within immune cells can drive severe disease. We were co-founded actually by a team of world-leading scientists in this field. We had seed funding from SV Health investors, and the company was formed actually when one of our founders, Luke O'Neill from Trinity College Dublin, was doing a sabbatical at GlaxoSmithKline, and a number of things came together to really drive the formation of the company. And now we've got a great syndicate of investors, including SV, Sofinova Partners, Oxford Science Enterprises, and the Longwood Fund, as well as two strategic investors, Lilly and GSK. We're around 45 people. We're based just outside of Oxford in the UK. And over the last year or two, we've made tremendous progress. We've had a great collaboration with Eli Lilly for a product that's going to enter phase 2. And we've just entered phase 1 with our own in-house lead compound, and candidate selected another compound, which hopefully I'll be able to tell you about during the course of today.
Perfect. So what conditions are you tackling?
Well, these mechanisms really are at play across a broad range of autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. And really, if you think about it, treatment of these diseases has kind of evolved sequentially over the last few decades. Certainly when I was a medical student, which is quite some time ago, treatment was focused on broad, very non-specific immunosuppressants, repurposing of chemotherapies, steroids, etc. And these were powerful, but really carried quite significant toxicities. Most of our work in those days was monitoring the side effects and the blood counts of patients. Then really in the early 90s and early 2000s, that was the advent of targeted therapies and biologics such as anti-TNFs and JAK inhibitors. And again, these really revolutionized how we were thinking about treatment by targeting specific pathways. But we've still suffered from a limitation in remission rates, and there have been ongoing safety concerns with that class of drugs. So what we're trying to do today is pursue novel targets with improved modalities and think about precision immunology, targeting the right cell at the right time in order to modify disease and also really drive up remission rates while maintaining a good safety profile. So there's been a sort of ongoing interest in autoimmunity and inflammation, both from pharma companies and investors. And our lead compound, actually, we're looking at atopic dermatitis. But actually, as I mentioned, these pathways are really at play in a wide variety of inflammatory diseases, including arthritis, lupus, inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis, etc.
So could you tell me a little bit about the approach that you take to taking on disease and conditions and how that is different to or improving on existing treatments?
Yeah, sure. So we're trying to shift beyond symptom management into disease remission. And I think our understanding of biology and advances in immunology are enabling us really to try and restore immune balance rather than suppress the immune system. The targets that we look at and the pathways that are at play are upregulated in certain inflammatory conditions, and they're only upregulated in certain cells during that time. So what that then allows us is a window of opportunity to try and target them to, if you like, reset those cells back to a much more normal phenotype and therefore bring lasting patient benefit and disease control without having a broad range of off-target side effects as a result of interfering with these pathways.
Could you tell me a bit about your lead candidate and how that works and where you're at with that currently?
Yeah, so we went into the clinic in March of this year. So we're currently dosing healthy volunteer cohorts, and that will be for the treatment of atopic dermatitis. The target is an enzyme called pyruvate kinase M2, and that's a critical enzyme in cell metabolism. But as I mentioned, it's only upregulated in certain cells when the cell gets stressed. It uses other enzymes of this pathway during normal conditions. So we have an oral small molecule that's able to modulate pyruvate kinase M2. That can alter T lymphocyte function as well as B cell function and represents a novel therapeutic approach with the potential to rebalance the immune system and normalize immune cell function. The biology is a little bit complicated. PKM2 gets upregulated, it forms a dimer and then a tetramer. And the tetramer is the molecule that we're trying to modulate and promote the formation of, because that then means the cell is effectively using a lot of its glycolytic pathways to try and proliferate and to try and generate cytokines, etc. And by us modulating PKM2, we can prevent that happening in the cells that are using that pathway and therefore divert it from a pro-inflammatory state into a much more resting state. We've chosen atopic dermatitis. It's a chronic skin condition that affects many millions of people worldwide. It starts in childhood, it goes through adolescence and goes on into adulthood. And over 5 million people in the US and Europe have a moderate to severe form of the disease with persistent itching and inflammation, and they require systemic therapy. At the moment, many of those patients get biologic therapy, which is great, but some of those biologic therapies don't treat all of the symptoms. So they may treat the inflammation, but not the itch, or treat the itch, but not the inflammation. And there are very few oral treatment options. So we think that our lead molecule, SYX5219, could be a significant advance for these patients. And the phase 1 trial that we're conducting really lays the groundwork for this development program. We'll get into patients later on this year, and we'll also be conducting a number of experimental medicine studies to try and better understand the mechanism of what we're doing so that we can apply it beyond atopic dermatitis to a wide range of diseases.
Is that a field that a lot of companies are working on developing treatments for, or are you kind of out on your own?
In terms of the pathway, we're out on our own. So as far as we know, there are not many companies targeting the metabolic pathways. However, there are a number of companies that are looking for oral treatments for atopic dermatitis. But in large part, a number of those are looking at mechanisms that perhaps lie downstream of existing biologic targets. So they represent, if you will, an oral version of a biologic target. In our case, when we modulate PKM2 in disease models in preclinical setting, we see an impact on inflammation, we see an impact on itching, and we also see an impact on skin barrier function. And as far as we're aware, there are not that many molecules that are out there that are able to do all three of those things. They can perhaps do one or two of those, but not all three. And as a result, we feel that we are differentiated in that space.
Obviously, your lead candidate and what you're working on there isn't the only thing that you do. Could you tell me a bit more about your SYX1042 and that journey?
Yeah, that's been a great journey, actually. That was part of a really successful collaboration we did with Lilly, who have been interested in this field as well over the last few years. That collaboration actually started during COVID and made tremendous progress across the Sitryx team and the Lilly team, despite the fact that none of those teams had ever really met each other. And we started the collaboration in 2020, and Lilly then took this compound into the clinic during 2024 and have generated data. The target is an itaconate mimetic. Now, itaconate is a natural anti-inflammatory, if you like, a metabolic checkpoint inhibitor that the body will make during times of inflammation as a way to control the immune system from getting overactive. And what we were able to develop was a mimetic of itaconate, which we successfully developed in collaboration. And that's gone into the clinic, and Lilly will be putting that into patients later on this year. I'm not able to talk too much about that as they've not disclosed the conditions that they're going after. But it's great for us because I think it validates the approach that we're taking. It validates our expertise and the fact that we are really pioneers in this field. And of course, in a partnership like this, it's great for us financially as we continue to receive milestones and hopefully royalties. So we're really excited about itaconate, and we're really pleased that partnership with Lilly has been so successful over the last few years.
And obviously there's a lot going on. You just had an announcement about your SIT047.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have been busy, as you can tell, and we recently announced that this is a program that's heading towards the clinic. We declared a development candidate earlier this year, and we hope to be in the clinic early next year. And again, this is another first-in-class candidate. It's an inhibitor this time rather than a modulator of an enzyme called MTHFD2. I won't spell it out. We'll just stick with the numbers. And this is a key enzyme in the folate cycle, which is part of something called one-carbon metabolism. And it sits primarily within the mitochondria and is upregulated very specifically in inflammatory conditions. And we can see that in different disease tissues. And we did some work with another one of our founders, Jeff Rathmel, where you can see very clearly that MTHFD2, over and above all the other enzymes in this cycle, is upregulated in a wide variety of inflammatory conditions. And it appears to be particularly pertinent to Th1 and Th17 cells. And so that gives us a broad canvas that we can really approach to think about demonstrating its impact in different diseases. We've got a strong data package right now, and we're embarking now on the IND enabling studies and manufacturing so that we can submit that application early in the new year. I think what's quite interesting, because we think there's an impact on both Th1 and Th17 biology, we're looking at first at a disease called psoriatic arthritis, which affects patients, as the name suggests, who have psoriasis, but also develop different types of arthritis. Actually, there are a number of different phenotypes that those patients can develop. But there is a sort of clear need for safe and effective oral therapies that can impact both the skin symptoms, which tend to be more Th17 driven, and the joint symptoms, the arthritic symptoms, which can be either Th1 or Th17 driven. And at the moment, there's a number of medicines out there, really biologics, that have been approved either for psoriasis or for rheumatoid arthritis, which are used in this condition, but they tend to impact one domain, the joints, or the other, the skin, but often they're not highly effective in both domains. So we think that there's a real opportunity here. But I think what's also interesting there is if we can see an impact on the joints and the skin, it opens the door to a wide variety of conditions. So on the arthritis side, of course, one would think about rheumatoid arthritis, one might think about inflammatory bowel disease. And then if we see an impact on the skin, we can think about diseases like psoriasis and hidradenitis suppurativa, and maybe some of the sort of overlap joint symptoms such as axial spondyloarthropathy and other conditions there. And we think, therefore, this could be a really, really important, an important intervention that we could make. So we're really excited about that. We're continuing to generate preclinical data, as I said, and we'll go into the clinic hopefully by this time next year.
Right. You mentioned the partnership with Lilly. Do you have other partnerships, and how important are partnerships to companies like yours?
I mean, I think in general, partnerships for small companies like Sitryx are critical. Not only do you get a really good interaction with large pharma companies that have a significant interest in these novel areas, it's obviously great financially as well. We don't currently have any other partnerships, although we are looking at collaborating with other big pharma companies, as there is increasing interest now in this type of approach to impact inflammatory diseases. I think there's a number of areas where pretty much all pharma companies have been prosecuting very similar mechanisms. I think what's unique about Sitryx is that there aren't any others who are looking at immunometabolism, and I think that's therefore attracted the attention of several other companies we are talking to at the moment. Obviously, I'm not in a position to disclose any more than that, but it's very exciting for us to recognize that, this field really is coming of age.
And as if that wasn't enough, all of the things that you've mentioned so far, do you have any other things in the pipeline or any other plans for trials, etc.?
We do have other stuff in the pipeline. It's a little bit further behind, and there are probably two medicines, one of which we'll definitely try and prosecute ourselves. We've got some really exciting preclinical data on, and we think we've got a compound that could be orally available and have a very nice kind of therapeutic index. So that's something we're definitely looking at, and hopefully might have more news on that later in the year. And then we have other compounds that are further behind, given the size of the company and the resources we have. Certainly for at least one of those, we're sort of actively looking at a potential partnership with another company to move that on. I think one of the challenges in this space is, with the novel biology, you've got to really probe very carefully, both in cellular systems and in animal systems, to unveil the biology and then find out exactly what it is you are looking at. We can look at tissue and we can see upregulation of these targets. We've got data scientists internally who are interrogating various publicly available databases. And then we use animal models really to get an idea of mechanism. And then we can put all those things together. But there's a limitation in how much of that a company of Sitryx can do. So we are often thinking about prosecuting some of the earlier compounds in the context of a partnership.
When it comes to the things that you're working on, what would you say represents success at the end of the line for the patients that you're treating?
I think for any patient, I used to treat a lot of these patients. I was a rheumatologist prior to joining the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. I think for a number of patients, what's important is to have a treatment that will put their symptoms into remission where possible, but it also is well tolerated, and they don't necessarily need to have lots of blood tests, or they don't have to suffer a number of side effects. And I think that's where we're trying to get to with this kind of era of immune-based therapies. And I think we're really well poised to do that. And if you think about the great strides that were made with the advent of targeted therapy, that was fantastic for patients. But we're really now ready for the next step. The next revolution has to be moving from, inducing a degree of disease control in a number of patients into inducing remission. And, who knows, in the future, drug-free remission for some of these patients, whether that's with rheumatoid arthritis, with severe asthma, with Crohn's disease or lupus. And we think that the mechanisms that we're prosecuting have an opportunity across all of those diseases. Obviously, not every pathway is going to be relevant in every single disease. And what it's up to us to sort of dissect out is which pathways are most relevant in which of those conditions. And that's something that I think is a really exciting opportunity. once again, I think it's really exciting for us and for all our teams and potential collaborators that we're working in this cutting edge area of science and now found a way to prosecute metabolic targets that people thought were either undruggable or too broad. And I think it's great for us to be able to have the compounds and identify where and when we can intervene in order to achieve disease remission and disease control across a wide variety of diseases.
Now it's over to Concept Life Sciences. It's the UK's biggest independent CRO, employing more than 250 people, and it has a corporate history of more than 25 years. The company's team and infrastructure cover all modalities, including small molecules, biologics, and cell and gene therapies, from the concept right the way through to the clinic. To tell us about the work going on at CLS and about its recent news is the company's CEO, Ben Cliff.
I wonder if you could give me a bit of the history of Concept Life Sciences.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. So first and foremost, CLS is a company with a really, really strong heritage. We've got legacy companies that date back into the late 90s and early 2000s, Peatdale Molecular, CXR Biosciences, and Aquila Biomedical. The company was effectively rebranded in 2014 as CLS, as Concept Life Sciences, and grew further through acquisition in environmental, analytical, and food businesses, would you believe, at that time as well. In 2018, we were bought by Sitryx, which were a FTSE 250 scientific instrument-focused business with a view to providing high-end scientific services as a counter-cyclical revenue stream to their capital-intensive scientific instruments. But I think it's fair to say that business thesis didn't quite pan out as planned. So fast forward to 2022, after 4 years of ownership, I received a phone call. It was one of those phone calls that changed my life. As Sitryx had decided that they ultimately wanted to divest Concept Life Sciences and wanted to put me forward as a de facto CEO at that point. So my feet haven't touched the ground since that point, as I'm sure you appreciate, Jim, and essentially engaging with potential buyers. And ultimately, the end of March 23, we were in the hands of our new owners as an independent organisation owned by Livingston Capital. So the first 12 to 18 months of this was enacting that carve-out, resetting up our internal systems, and really resetting the business in that core discovery to early stage development service organisation, which we are today. And a really exciting part of that was a relaunch of our new concept to clinic roadmap, which really helps articulate our services. I think it's fair to say that coming out as an independent CRO in the last couple of years into the current market conditions has been quite difficult. The market for funding in the VC space has been quite tricky, as I'm sure you're well aware, and it's been well publicised in the overall market for big players as well as small companies. And last year, late on, we did our first acquisition of Charnwood Discovery, who were a great contract research organisation company making great commercial progress, but were hamstrung with excessive costs. So Charnwood unfortunately ultimately went into administration, and we were able to take the team, the assets and the clients into Concept Life Sciences, really taking the opportunity to rebuild our existing operations and building that critical mass. So it's been a hell of a journey the last couple of years, and we've got a lot more to come.
You mentioned it being kind of frantic. Has that calmed down a bit now?
In private equity ownership, Jim, I think I'm realising that there's no such thing as a quiet day. It's all full tilt. And to be fair, we've got a lot to do, enabling the Charnwood acquisition to have a maximum impact for us, setting the overall strategy of the business, and obviously communicating internally to our team as much as communicating externally to potential customers about our capabilities is a key part of it.
What have been some of the changes in the industry since you started? It's
a good question. I think reflecting on where the pharma and biotech industry has been over the last 20 years or so is, it's important to do, because I think around the turn of the century, the big pharma companies were absolutely preeminent in how they did their work. the behemoths of scientific output, all the talent contained within their four walls, and so forth. And the drugs that came to market were very much the product of their work efforts internally. But, over the last 2 decades, and particularly the last decade, those pharma companies have increasingly outsourced more and more key parts initially, but now whole discovery programs, whole clinical programs, and so forth to external partners. And really what that's meant is that contract research organizations like ourselves are now part of a broad ecosystem of external partners, where it actually means that a lot of the science is actually delivered through these partnerships as much as within the pharma companies themselves.
What services does your company provide?
From our perspective, our services cover that end-to-end discovery, from first synthesis of a new molecule all the way through to GMP API production at kilogram scale for first toxicology and first in-man clinical trials. So that's at a broad level, but when you delve into the detail, drug discovery is an iterative process. So going through the design, make, test cycle with medicinal chemistry, with screening biology and translational biology, ADME, DMPK, and ultimately through to GMP manufacture is where our sweet spot is. And as the molecules move into translational biology, we've got a huge expertise in specific disease areas such as immuno-oncology, neuroscience, and liver disease in particular, with a really comprehensive portfolio of assays to serve customers.
And what kind of companies are you working with?
So our key customer, Jim, is around the small biotech to mid-sized pharma companies. We do work with some large-scale organizations, but very much more on a tactical service level with them. But geographically, our client base is predominantly in the US. The majority of our revenue comes from North America, obviously still the largest drug discovery market globally, although obviously China is coming up very fast on the rails, but there's also other territories like South Korea coming up fast as well. But we have a large client base in our indigenous UK market, but in Europe and the rest of the world as well.
Obviously, there are other companies in the field as well. What do you do to stay ahead, and what do you think it is that sets you apart from other companies?
This is a key thing we've been thinking about the last 2 years since we've become independent again, Jim. In an R&D focused organization, we absolutely have to keep focusing on investment in the business, not just in terms of the capital infrastructure, but actually from the development of new assays, keeping on top of new developments scientifically, and actually horizon scanning and being ahead of the curve in those areas. To really catalyze that for us over the last 9 months, we've actually set up a scientific advisory board who are key players in the areas in which we specialize in, who complement our internal knowledge and capability really well. So a couple of people that we recently brought on are Professor Luke O'Neill, one of the most highly respected and influential immunologists globally. He's based at Trinity College in Dublin. He's supporting our biology teams on that high-end immunology. And Professor Shane Lidlow from University of New York Langone Medical Center. His area of expertise is neuroscience and neurodegenerative diseases. And Shane is bringing that knowledge to bear of the disease areas and how we run our assays for our customers, which really helps with that engagement and making sure we're keeping ahead of the curve from the point of view of the market.
I know you mentioned some of the areas that you focus on and that you're known for. Is there ever a danger of kind of overextending yourself and saying we should be in these areas as well? Or is it important to keep the focus narrow in a small number of subjects or wide in more subjects?
That's a really good question. And I think from where we are, Jim, as a SME organization, small to medium enterprise, 250 people, we cannot be everything to everybody. So we have to have that focus. So what we choose to do is use external partners to deliver areas that we cannot do ourselves in the short term. But that allows us to really focus on our internal capability and being the best it can be for a company of our size. And that's very much where we're positioning ourselves.
And you mentioned the fact that it's never static and that there's always a lot going on. I guess the latest thing that's impacted the industry, or one of the things, has been artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing. Is that affecting what you do?
Yes, it is. In a word, I think it's impacting pretty much every industry globally today, of course, and drug discovery is a key part of that because of the skill sets involved. So we're seeing it not only internally, which I'll come on to shortly, but actually our customers, our clients, are using AI to help define their programs, define their new molecules, and so forth. And what they then require is somebody to turn their in silico research into tangible drug discovery assets. So that's where we can do the chemistry, bring that to bear, make those AI postulated molecules real and apply them in assays to prove that they do what the AI is suggesting that they can do. But of course, we also do that internally. So we have recently launched a new service called BioPals, which is essentially a new tool to accelerate the drug discovery process using biophysics in combination with the AI to really get an acceleration for that choice of candidate molecule. I should also say that from an AI perspective, what's really important, and again, we're seeing this from our clients as well, is making sure that we have full control of that AI when we use it. So our clients' most important asset to them is their intellectual property. And as a CRO, we have to be absolutely critically mindful of making sure that we're protecting that intellectual property. So making sure we're not disclosing, we're not making anything available to AI that our clients don't want us to. And I think that's something to be really mindful of as well.
Could you tell me a little bit about your peptide discovery engine and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. So when we acquired Charnwood, one of the really important skill sets that Charnwood were doing very well was peptide synthesis and peptide discovery. And really being able to bring that into concept life sciences has been really invaluable. So therapeutic peptides are obviously an exciting new modality at the interface between small molecules and biologics proteins. So they can be that best of both worlds between specificity and versatility, particularly when it comes to how they're administered, typically orally. And of course, with the GLP-1 agonists, obesity and diabetes type products that are going to market, there's a huge amount of activity in therapeutic peptides, with over 300 currently in clinical development globally. But with those new modalities comes new rules, of course, applying to how those molecules are characterized, how they're developed, and how they understood from a discovery point of view, not only from medicinal chemistry, but also DMPK, toxicology, and so forth. So what we've been able to bring to bear with the expertise we've brought in is to help develop several clinical candidates in this field. So more so than just the pure synthesis of the peptides, we're actually supporting our clients with that end-to-end drug discovery service to provide that hit to lead, the lead optimization, and really that piece is rather unique in the field at the moment because many of our competitors focus on specific individual services like synthesis or toxicology. So being able to apply it to that overall drug discovery piece is absolutely critical.
Clearly, AI is helping with some of those concerns, but how were you able to kind of shorten that journey between drug discovery and the clinic and hopefully launch of a product?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. I think, the drug discovery process remains a huge investment in terms of time and a financial commitment from our customers, of course. And what we're bringing to bear is that knowledge about how to work through that process to get the drugs faster to market by cycling through the design, make, test, analyze cycle quickly. We have all of our drug discovery services co-located here on site in Chapel. So the chemistry, the ADME, and the screening biology, supplemented by our wider services, which means that we're able to do all of that under literally one roof, which accelerates that process on behalf of our customers. We also, because we've got the ability to go from that first synthesis of new molecules all the way through to GMP API production, it means that we can move far more quickly from that scale up when you're working through the synthesis at a milligram scale all the way through process research and development to creating kilograms of API ready for use in those first toxicology batches, which means that our clients can move super quickly from the concept through to the clinical batches.
You mentioned about the acquisition a bit earlier. Could you explain a little bit about how you're growing your business and why it's important to keep growing?
Yes, as an independent organization and at any CRO, the top line revenue is absolutely critical. Our lab-based businesses have a really high fixed cost base, not only in terms of the physical infrastructure, the laboratories, but more importantly, the fantastic talent we've got in terms of our scientists. Therefore, driving that value through the business from the top line sales growth is absolutely critical. But our customers have to have those funds to be able to spend on R&D services. This has been a real challenge in the current investment environment. It's been well publicized from big players as much as mid-sized players as ourselves. But, in the context where venture capital funding to biotechs in the early stage has been quite difficult to come by, and a lot of investment money is going into customers pushing drugs further to the right in terms of the clinical point of view. The discovery space has been under-resourced in recent years. So in that context, it's absolutely critical that our sales and marketing engine is performing optimally. So we're investing heavily in lead generation, updating websites, driving search engine optimization and so forth to drive that engagement with the customer base. And what's really nice about our organization is we can grow into the future from our existing physical footprints. We're not capacity constrained, which gives us a great stability and runway into the future. And of course, as with any business in this space, we're always evaluating bolt-on acquisitions, which can bring us access to either new markets or new capability. So I would urge everybody to watch this space in terms of what's coming.
What does the future hold for the company? Not that you have a crystal ball, because there could be another pandemic around the corner or anything.
This company has had a number of different incarnations over recent years with our previous ownership, but our current incarnation is absolutely laser focused on our core market of discovery to early stage development, with backers, our investors, who really understand the sector in which we operate, which means that we're in a really strong position to grow our reputation and our client base. There's a real piece of this around being a mid-sized CRO in the UK. We are well positioned from a point of view of the geographical aspects and uncertainty around things like the Biosecure Act around China and the outsourcing strategies that have been heavily trailed over the last couple of years within the biotech space. And we're actually seeing more customers driving to nearshore their activity back to Europe and specifically the UK as a result of that instability. And I personally firmly believe that the UK remains, an absolutely compelling country to service this industry with, not only a great scientific reputation, but actually with a competitive cost base. So, as we continue to grow and develop our services, our clients will see that vision that we have of being a trusted partner from concept through to clinic come to life. And we're looking to support as many of those customers as we can on the journey as they develop those medicines to develop and benefit patients on a global basis.
And you already mentioned the fact that you have a strong focus on the US, but you also mentioned other emerging economies and emerging countries in this space like South Korea. So clearly there are other opportunities that may present themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. It's interesting that South Korea last year, for the first year, leapfrogged the UK as the third largest centre for drug discovery in terms of number of new molecules being worked on, from the US, China, and into South Korea, then the UK. So we've actually got one of my colleagues out in South Korea this week at one of the big biotech events, engaging with new customers in that important territory.
And another interesting conversation there, and a real UK success story of a company going from strength to strength. Well, that's it for this week's podcast. Next week's interviews are done and even edited. I know there's a first time for everything, but I'll be out of the office for 2 days at an event which I'm looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to having to deal with connections, though. They seem to get tighter, or maybe I'm just getting slower. If you have questions or comments or suggestions for guests, please do get in touch, and you can do so at jim@deeptechdigest.com. So, until next week, wherever in the world you are, I hope you have a great week. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Base-to-Base Biotech podcast. The Base-to-Base Biotech podcast is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.